Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a beginner to advanced fantasy book recommendations, and I'm not going to be structuring this video where I start from the beginner of the beginner type of fantasy books all the way to the most advanced, but rather I'm going to start with a book and then have two books that you can then progress to that are united in some way, whether that be through a magic system, the tone of the story, the writing style. Something about the books is similar where you can start if you think it sounds appealing here, and then you can then work to something a little bit more advanced. Some of these recommendations will take into consideration the age range to start, and then some are not necessarily going to start with a younger tone, but rather just a, I think, more digestible, easy to get into type of story and progress to something that is maybe not as easy to get into. And then just a heads up, I am always open to recommending books, even if they didn't personally work for me, because I know that there's so much that involves subjective taste when it comes to books. Kicking off the list, we're going to start with The Thief, Age of Assassins, and The Blade itself, or the First Law series. The thing that I personally find all of these books share is their tone and the very gritty, real way of seeing the world. There is a bleakness to the setting in all of these, but I don't think that these books are entirely lacking in hope, nor do I think that when you read these, they are just one depressing thing after the next. I actually think that the authors have found ways to have characters see the atrocities in the world, to see the world for how it is, while also pulling in some elements of humor as well, which makes it much easier to digest, not just as the reader, but as the characters themselves. It's easier for them to exist within these worlds, knowing that they can make a joke sometimes, or knowing that there's something else that brings them amusement. And I think with The Thief, this is the one that 100% would be the starting place. It's not only young adult, but it's also much shorter. And I think that the plot for a long time is just sort of characters interacting with one another. The setup for the story is that you have this character who was caught, they were captured for trying to steal something, but they got so close to accomplishing this remarkable act of thievery that this particular royal figure has had their attention caught by this feat and now wants to utilize this thief's skills to their advantage, and they want them to steal something that should otherwise be impossible to steal. Obviously, there's risk of this thief just leaving and doing whatever they want and not actually following through. So there are some individuals that are tasked with following this character and leading them. So in a way, the thief is sort of a prisoner until they reach a certain destination, and that's when it's like, this is when we're expecting you to follow through with the task you've been assigned. It does mean that it's somewhat of a traveling story for quite a while, and there are aspects that are quite brutal about this setting, and there are moments where you're like, no, I don't want this one thing to happen. But then things definitely pick up as you progress. And even though it is considered young adult, I think that this is one of those types of books that sort of goes beyond its age range. That even if you are an adult and you find that maybe you don't connect with a lot of the themes that are in a lot of young adult books, that this one is still one I would recommend giving a chance. And also you can see the progression of books that I recommend after, and if you like those, maybe that can signal to you that you would like to go backwards from maybe advanced to something a little bit easier to read. Maybe it's a lot faster, it's less of a commitment. This is a longer series I haven't continued on, and I really want to because I really enjoyed this one. The main character is quite snarky at times, sometimes to the point of being frustrating and annoying, which is true of, I would say, some of the characters in First Law as well. But in general, if you're looking for a great place to start, maybe you're interested in Age of Assassins or you're interested in First Law, but you're like, I don't know, those are kind of daunting, I would say this is a pretty good one to start with. Next up, we have Age of Assassins as the middle spot here. And Age of Assassins follows a character who is the apprentice to an assassin, and they are being trained on how to be an assassin. However, sort of kind of like how in The Thief, they are a thief and they're being hired to use their thieving skills to steal. These assassins are using or being asked to use their assassin skills to find another assassin. They really don't have a choice in the matter, similar to how you see the character in The Thief really not have a choice in their matter as well, which is something that I think is common in, even if these aren't all considered grimdark, it's something that you see in these types of settings where characters, they might have agency in their desires, but not necessarily in their abilities. They can't do whatever they want. They don't have a lot of power in their own lives, so they have to find their agency sort of in a bubble, if that makes sense. But in this one, we follow this character named Gertin, who I think has a fantastic connection with their mentor figure, but there is a lot going on outside of their control. And again, there is this element of the world is very dark, the world is very brutal, and the author does show that, but they do it in a way where it's not shock value. It's sort of just how the world is, and it's terrible and it's awful. And we're seeing this character Gertin, who, even though this is considered adult fantasy, I almost think there's more of a coming of age feel to this character and this story than there was in the other one. But it's done in a way where you just feel for this character. You kind of see yourself going through what he's going through. And I just found that the mentor relationship, the politicking that's going on behind the scenes, the sense of sort of hopelessness, but finding these little moments that sort of help you keep going. It made for, I think, a very compelling read, even if it's not the fastest of reads. And also, I know that with Age of Assassins, it seems like it's going to be action-packed. It's really not. It's kind of a slower moving, you just sort of soak everything in kind of story. And then that leads us to The Blade itself. This one is very popular here on BookTube. You have likely already heard about it. This one of the three is the least plot-driven. So the other ones, you kind of have a main point that you can say, this is what the characters are doing, or this is what brings these characters together. This is what propels them forward. And in this one, it's like, here are some not great people doing some things, and maybe it'll all come together. I don't know. That's sort of the feel. And you almost don't really get to see payoffs until you've put in the time. But it is a story that 100% has a very dark, bleak world. Everybody is sort of selfish in a very realistic way, and it sort of is depressing, but at the same time, sometimes reading those kinds of books, you're like, yeah, that is how people are. It does suck. And it sort of makes you feel seen and heard. But either way, we follow a few different characters, one being Glokta, who was a person who was a prisoner of war and was tortured in that time, and so now when you are meeting him, he has a lot of physical disabilities, he has chronic pain, and he is thinking through how that affects him in basically his everyday life. But now Glokta has become a torturer himself to gain information that his employers need. So it's kind of a really dark, twisted character type. And then you also follow a character named Logan, who seems very lovable but has a very dark past and is known for somebody who has done a lot of really terrible things, and you don't really know what those are or how much truth there is to his reputation. You also follow a character named Zal, who is unbearable and so annoying, and just, he's stupid. He's so stupid, but at the same time, you find yourself amused by him as the story progresses because he's so over the top, so self-centered, and just lacking in a lot of his decisions and his way of processing the world. And then you do have another character introduced later named Pharaoh, and I don't want to say too much about her character because she is introduced later, I think, for a reason, but she is somebody who is filled with rage, who really wants to get revenge, and the way that she ends up interacting with these other characters, the way they all come together, is done in a very kind of unexpected way, because for the longest time you don't know how everybody's going to join. But regardless, I think that if you've ever wanted to pick up First Law, but you're unsure, I think those other ones are a nice way to build up into this particular trilogy. The books that we have next would be Alotsoe, Legendborn, and then Parable of the Sower. And these ones, the thing that I feel brings them together and makes them somewhat similar and perhaps would make them books that you'd want to check out if you liked another, has to do with the magic system, but not in the way that you would generally expect from magic systems. It's not that they're all extremely complex. It's not that they all are the kinds of really action-packed type of magic systems, but rather how the magic relates to the characters, to history, to ancestry, to things done in the past. All of these books take place within our own world. So there is an element of our own history playing a role in the magic. I don't want to elaborate too much on that because I do think that's sort of part of the reveals in all of these stories. So if they do sound interesting and you are looking for magic systems that maybe are a little bit tied to more personal difficult and often traumatic things, then I think that these are ones to check out. Alatsue is a murder mystery type of story. I have seen it considered young adult, but I also think that there are aspects of it that feel middle grade as well. I think a middle grade reader could definitely come into this. It does lean a little bit young, but I think that can be a good thing, whether you are somebody who finds that you enjoy reading younger books, or maybe there's a person in your life who's looking to get into fantasy or looking to go out of middle grade. This is probably a good one to transition them out of it. But either way, we follow this murder mystery, and our main character is Native American, and there's a lot to do with Native American beliefs tied in, again, kind of what I was saying about all of these, tied into the magic system itself. With Legendborn, this is a King Arthur retelling. It's modern day, and it's not so much King Arthur retelling as it is the King Arthur legend and how that is currently playing a role now. Almost like Percy Jackson style, where you're not reinventing the original story, but you're sort of taking that and then you're showing how it's trickled down into modern day. Our main character is going to school, so there is a little bit of a school setting, and then they're starting to learn a lot more about magic, but there's more than one kind of magic system, and how that plays into the character, their loss of a family member. That's not a spoiler, that's the opening of the book. The character is struggling with the loss of her mother, and how she is able to find some solace in the magic, while also there's a sense of tragedy, and there's a sense of having to persevere through what has been done in the past that you see very present in this story. And then with Parable of the Sower, the main character has something called hyper-empathy, which the way it's presented is much less magical than in the other ones. It's almost treated as if it's a condition that some people have. And the way hyper-empathy works is that when somebody is physically harmed, if our character sees that, she feels that pain too. And so she sort of is in a very difficult situation because the world in this particular story is in a terrible place. It's our world, but just a few years in the future, and things are absolutely horrible. People are doing terrible things. It is one of the bleakest books I've ever read. There's really not humor the way you find in something like First Law. It's not funny. It's not gonna shy away from showing what human beings are capable of, which makes it very challenging for this character to navigate, because they are on their way to trying to find a place where maybe they can find safety and also share their particular beliefs that they have developed through observing the world, through being a part of religious groups, by seeing all these terrible things, but also seeing people trying to come through. She wants to survive, she wants to establish something better for the world, and to defend herself is a risk, because if she does not end a person's life when she's defending herself, their pain becomes her pain, and then that can make her vulnerable to other people. There are aspects of the hyper-empathy that are elaborated on later in the book, and it's sort of something that I think maybe it just sort of is there, and some people might not even think too much about it. But if you really analyze what the author is doing in that moment, and if you really analyze what is being said or what is being implied, or maybe just interpreting it in your own way, you can see how maybe this one relates to the other ones. But again, don't want to give away spoilers, because that's something that doesn't really get revealed until later. And it's not even a set in stone, this is how it always is. So there's a lot that maybe is left up to the imagination of the reader, and just a lot left unanswered. Next up, we have Steelheart, Foundry Side, and Black Prism. You can probably guess why I'm associating these together, and that would be the magic systems. All of these have a really prominent magic system that plays a huge role in the story, in the plot, how the main character interacts with others, with the world, and of course, how that impacts their life. It really is what often propels the plot forward, or what pulls readers in. With Steelheart, this one I would say is perhaps the softest of the three. The setup is that, what if superheroes were actually all garbage, basically? What if they're all really terrible people? And our main character has seen firsthand the effects of one of these superhero type people that are actually terrible, and now is determined to figure out the weakness of this person, and maybe if people can fight back, and if they can stand a chance against this group because they are oppressing a lot of society. And then from there you have Foundry side. Our main character in Foundry side is somebody who is supposed to steal something to complete a job, but the thing that they steal is clearly way more important than they ever expected, and now there are a lot of people that are after them. And the way the magic system works is that people have the ability to sort of warp reality in regards to specific objects. The example that kind of always is given is that if there is a cart with wheels, you program the wheels to believe that there is wind so that they would go a certain direction. They would move because they believe that there is wind blowing that is pushing them forward. And there's so much more to it than just that, but basically you can program objects to believe their reality is different. And the thing that our character happens to have stolen is something that can change even further what has been programmed into certain objects. So it's a very fascinating magic system. The tone is a little bit silly at times. The tone is, I would say, a lot more action-packed, fun, adventurous type of story. It's not really all that serious. And the same with Steelheart. Steelheart has big moments, of course. It has emotional moments. But both of them have not the bleak type of settings that we were talking about with the previous books. And then over at the end, we have Black Prism. The magic system here is color-based, and some people have the ability to take power from certain colors. Other people have the ability to take power from multiple colors, and then there is an individual who has the ability to take power from all the colors. That person is known as the Prism. They are very highly regarded. They are holding a lot of power within their society, both literally through the magic, but also politically. And one of our main characters is someone who is the Prism, and there is another character who is believed to actually be this character's son. There's also lots of twists and turns in these stories, so if any of those sound appealing to you, if you're a big sucker for an interesting action-packed magic system-based type of story, then these ones I think are a natural progression. Next up we have the book Heartless, and then followed by Little Thieves and Malice. All of these are fairy tale retellings, but the thing that goes a little bit beyond and that makes them closer related is that they all are focusing on the origin stories or the following of villainous characters. So in Heartless, you're looking at the Queen of Hearts. How does she become the Queen of Hearts? Originally, the character is very sweet, very innocent. All she wants to do is have her own little bakery. But this character has a really difficult time making her voice heard, and there are decisions being made for her that she is opposed to, but she just doesn't know how to communicate that. And then she finds herself falling in love with a character, and she starts to view her life going in a certain direction. And then because it's a villain origin story, you as the reader know where that life is going to end up, except you don't know, okay, but is the author going to take some creative liberties? Are they actually going to change things? Will it actually work out for this character, or are things really going to go downhill? So there's almost a sense of dread the entire time you're reading it, and you're like, it's cute, it's a fun story, they're not going to go there. And then as you're reading, you're like, are they going to go there? And then after that, Little Thieves is a little different. It follows a character who was the villain in a particular sort of fairy tale story. So this actually follows one that I wasn't all that familiar with, which would be the Goose Girl story. And the villain in the story is our main character here. She is somebody who has lived a life that is very much affected by class issues. She is part of a lower class, and her mother traded her to these demigod-like beings, and those beings raised her, but they are not human themselves. They have a certain way of having life function, and they want her, our main character, to fit into a certain mold. So there's another similarity with Heartless. But our character, unlike the main character in Heartless, she will not accept this. She does not want her parents' favor, but the world is not kind to people who don't already have a favorable hand, and so she's going to carve out one for herself. And the way she does this is by stealing, and she ends up stealing this necklace, these pearls, from this important person and taking that person's place. And in doing so, she is now able to glamour herself as that person and then steal from the very people that likely would have oppressed her before. But there is somebody on the case. There is somebody who is investigating all of these thefts. And this person has some knowledge when it comes to magic as well. And so now our character is trying to avoid getting caught. And on top of all of that, as a result of their perhaps not the most pure deeds, because in making the decisions that she's made, she has affected other people's lives in a negative way. She ends up being cursed, and if she doesn't right her wrongs, then she is going to die, basically. But there's not clear indications of how she's supposed to right her wrongs. So now she's trying to still make a life for herself, right her wrongs, not get caught, and she still wants to escape and doesn't really know how else to do that beyond continuing to steal from people. So she's definitely caught between a rock and a hard place in this story. But what is great about this is she's not this terrible, heartless, horrible person. She is somebody who has had a certain set of circumstances handed to her, and she is trying to survive. And so you kind of root for her, but then sometimes you're like, ooh, maybe crossed the line, but I also get why you did it. And then after that, we have the book Malice, not John Gwynne Malice, but this particular Malice. And this one, I would say the setup for the story seems a little bit closer to Heartless, where it is truly a villain origin story specifically for Maleficent. And she is heavily mistreated. People are rotten and mean to her. And then she meets this princess who actually is quite nice to her. And it's very surprising, and she feels very undeserving of this love because everybody has always told her that she is a terrible, worthless person to exist. And so you're seeing as this character is starting to gain a little bit more confidence in themselves, trying to realize that maybe they have more value and worth than they expected. And you have this princess character who is helping build that in them, while also having people that are continuing to hate them for who they are. And you're seeing this clash, and you really don't know which side is going to win in her internal conflict. And sometimes externally, how are people going to treat her? Because sometimes it doesn't matter how you feel about yourself if the world sees you a certain way. So it's actually quite a tragic setup. And just like with Heartless, you're kind of wondering the whole time, are you going to end up becoming this maybe not nice person? That's it for some beginner to advanced fantasy recommendations, also incorporating a little bit of age range, you know, going from literally middle grade YA to more adult. I'm definitely very interested in seeing some progressions that you think would be really helpful to people and what you think ties certain books together. If you like this style of video, I will have my other one linked in the description bar down below, as well as happily doing other ones in the future because I really like this setup in beginner to advanced recommendations. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.